former federal prosecutor Tammy Allison. Tammy, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
All right. So obviously the big issue of the day is whether Derek Chauvin would take the stand. We found out the answer. Finally, he would not be taking the stand. I'd love to get your opinion on that decision.
You know, when I was on last time, I predicted he would not take the stand. You know, it would be incredibly, different for him to take the stand in his own defense. Typically, defense attorneys do not like putting their clients on the stand because what happens is, like in this case, 14 days that we have seen the trial take place where the defense has been trying to raise doubt. Doubt is what is needed because beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard. If Mr. Chauvin would have taken the stand, almost anything he would have said would have raised some type of doubt, especially because he would have been open to cross-examination by the state.
You know, what's interesting is one of the jurors, I can remember specifically saying during voir dire, and he was ultimately chosen for the jury, was that, oh, I'd love to have heard, oh, actually you wrote this in the questionnaire, I'd love to hear from Derek Chauvin. And on voir dire, Derek Nelson was sure to let him know, look, we don't have to take the stand, we don't have to prove anything. But the fact remains that juries, even with the instruction that we heard there that the judge will end up giving them, you know, especially in this case, you have this video, you want to hear from Derek Chauvin. I mean, how important is this in terms of how the jury views this case and views Derek Chauvin, most of them coming in, obviously, with perhaps a negative perception?
Well, it is important, but it's important to realize that even though Mr. Chauvin is caught on camera with his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, that he is entitled to the protections of the state and the federal Constitution, as the judge pointed out. While the jury may have wanted to hear from him, he still has a right that is protected under the Constitution. And the jury also received instruction from the judge, because Mr. Chauvin chose for that jury instruction to be given, that the jury cannot take into consideration his decision not to take the stand in any type of negative light. So hopefully the jury listens to the instructions as provided by the judge, not to hold that against Derek Chauvin for not taking the stand. He has a constitutional right, like I said, on the state and the federal level. And if we started to push for defendants not to exercise their constitutional rights, that could open up a door that we don't want to go down, because we know that it could turn into a lot of chaos.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I found is that jurors do take that relatively seriously. I mean, if anyone mentions it in the jury rooms, there'll be someone in there to say, look, the judge said we can't look at it that way, and they sort of keep each other in check in that sense. But, and my experience has been that when you put a defendant on the stand, it almost all becomes about that defendant and how the jury feels about them, whether they like them, whether they believe what they're saying or don't believe it, and almost all the other evidence goes out the window. So I want to ask you, at this point, do you think that there has been enough of a case put forth by the defense that it was prudent to put their faith in a reasonable doubt?
I do think that the defense has put a good case forward, as good of a case as they can, given the evidence that we've all seen internationally, the video with, his knee in George Floyd's neck. But I do not believe that, they've been able to raise that doubt that is required, because there are several charges that Derek Chauvin is facing here. And I think that strategically the prosecution really pushed for the lesser included charges just in case they were not able to fully meet the intent element. So as much as a good job as the defense has attempted to do, I honestly do not believe that that necessary requirement of doubt to overshadow that standard of beyond a reasonable doubt is going to be effective.
And, it's a win for the defense. We got to remember, at one point, Derek Chauvin was willing to take a plea. He was going to take a plea on the third-degree murder charge and get 10 years. So anything in that range would really be considered a win for the defense in this case. All right, Tammy, stand by. We do have to take a break.